Step one, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step two, get some good, some food in you. Step three.
Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Talk Tuesday episode. As you can see from the title, it's going to be about single parent family and just some statistics on it and my own experience with it and just my personal opinion on some aspects of it. I just want to say before I get into any of the video that my opinion part of this is that it is my opinion and it's not fact, it's not meant to disvalue your opinion or discredit, I should say, your opinion or your experience. And just before we get onto this, I just want to make an example of what I mean by that. And it's just a scenario where, if you can imagine that I go into a shop and you go into a shop at the same exact time, and in that shop you have a great experience and I have an awful experience at the exact same time in the exact same shop, and we both walk out and we both got two different sets of opinions, but yet we both went and done the same thing at the same time. It doesn't, my bad experience doesn't make your good experience any less right or wrong than what my own experience is. So just try and keep that like analogy in mind as I delve into kind of my experience and where I come from with things like this. According to statistics today that I got off the Gingerbread website, which is a charity that helps single parent families, I'll leave the link down below to where I've got the information from. There's 1.8 million single parent families in the UK today. That makes up almost a quarter of all families in the UK with dependent children. So that's like quite a lot. That's like 25%, is it? So 1.8 million, 25%. If you see me looking down, I've just got some little bits here that I've been looking at. Another statistic is, and I feel like I want to put this in because I was a teenage parent, and it's less than 1% of parents or teenage parents today in the UK. One statistic that I want to touch on is that the portion of single parent families is that 90% of them are women, which is like me, and 10% of them are men, and that's in the UK. And that kind of statistic is stabilised for the past decade. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's just that it shows that the majority of women experience being a single parent compared to men, and that was my case and it is my case, and it was also the case for me mum, and it was also the case for me nan. So I'd have to look more into it with statistic wise, but that's like my history of it in my family. And then I think my granddad's mum was a single parent. I'm not sure about me nan's mum and dad, I think that they were together, but it just goes to show that sometimes there can be a pattern. And I think this is where my video is going to go today, is that I think that pattern can sometimes come from learned behaviour and expectations that we pick up as children when we're raised in a single parent family. Now this doesn't mean that goes for every situation, it doesn't. Every situation's different, as I explained with the shop analogy, but for my situation, and I'd say for some situations, I feel like this is maybe the same for them as it is for me. So when I'm talking about expectations that we pick up as children and learn behaviour, I'm not saying that every child picks it up or learns this way. Some children, maybe a majority, I haven't got statistics to hand, and I haven't got any personal experience with it, but it will happen, and I don't know the percentage wise how much it happens, but some children will come out of single parent families and go on to have successful, loving relationships with their partner, whether that be a man or a woman. But in my circumstance, where I look back at my pattern of my family and then I look at my own pattern within me and what's happened with me, I've recognised the pattern, and I want to hopefully be the person or the parent to maybe not change it, but just make my children more aware of it, so that they can maybe not I don't want to say not do it, because life is life, but maybe be more mindful when it comes to their own relationships, and maybe not have to make the mistakes that have been made down the line, the last at least 3 generations. So going back into single parenthood and my family, we'll start with my nan, and I'll just briefly touch on it. She was a single parent in the end to 7 children, but she had 4 children, no, she had 5 children to my granddad, and then she had 2 children to her next husband, who isn't my granddad. So just talking about her first 5 children she had with my granddad. She did get married and they had their own home. She was young when she got pregnant. I think she was 18 when she had her first daughter, Helen. And then she obviously had children afterwards, 4 more children, and they were all quite close in age. But this was going back to like the 1940s, 1950s, completely normal what you done and what you do, so no judgment. And she was with my granddad and they lived together, and I think in some aspects they were happy, from what I can tell from my mum. They didn't have the most money in the world, obviously different variables plays into that, and I'm not going to go into that in this video, but it kind of delved into addiction on my granddad's side and stuff like that. So I think they had like a bit of like a business that was left to them from my granddad's dad, and it kind of got ruined because my granddad had an addiction, and yeah, it kind of stemmed from that. So my nan was with my granddad. I don't know how long, I don't know the details and all that, but I just know that they were together, say at least 10 years, and they had 5 children, and they had a house together, they were married, and they did have a business, and they were set up to have a stable home. And so they had everything that you would think was going to set the family up. And what happened was my nan ended up being with a man who had an addiction problem. And I don't know when he walked out, but my mum was around, I think she was like in between the ages of 5 or 8. And he walked out and left the family home. And the stability and the structure that was there was just completely ruined. And I can only imagine that what was there in place maybe wasn't the best, and maybe them splitting up was the best thing at the time, but his absence and just walking away really affected my mum. And I can't speak for any other family members, but I know it did affect them, but to what degree I don't know. But for my own mum, from what I can see, it really affected her view on men and her respect for men, and that kind of worked its way down the line to me and say my siblings, and the way she brought us up, and you know, things like that. So this is where they say there's like a pattern. Obviously my nan didn't intend to be a single mum, and she just ended up being one, and it ended up that back in those days, you know, it wasn't the thing to be or be seen to be, and she had no choice, and she had to go out and work. She at the time, I think she had young children, so they were like, I don't know, I think my uncle was like 3 or 4 and my mum was like 5 or 6, and then she had like a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. It was really small gaps between the age groups of the kids, and all of a sudden she had to go and be the breadwinner and work and look after the house and do what she needed to do. Now my nan, give her credit where credit's due, she done her absolute best. She did go out and get a really good job, she never gave up. Sometimes she'd have 2-3 jobs. She ended up being able to buy the house that she was in. She learned how to drive, she got a car, and she helped people in the community. And you know, she did bring the kids up ultimately alone. Now that doesn't mean to say it went without struggle, because it didn't, and that struggle is what my mum felt, and probably her other siblings. Like, they didn't always have a lot of money. My nan wasn't always emotionally able to be there the way she needed, so she had a lot of emotional neglect, I'd say. And then my granddad, which is her dad, walking out was also a huge abandonment issue and neglect, and it just caused so many issues within my mum. And if you kind of want to know the results of that, you can go and watch my last Talk Tuesday video. And she kind of, you know, that kind of made its way down to me and my siblings, and we had a hard time with it. But yeah, so my mum just ultimately, out of it all, she gained a huge lack of respect for men. And I don't know if she ever realised it, or if she did later on in life, I don't know, but from what I can gather, she didn't realise she had a lack of respect and where it came from, all she knows is that she just didn't like men. And that's what I remember of my mum, is she never respected men in any way. And I'm not saying like she should, you know, be down on her knees to a man, you know, oh, it's a man, but like she just, it was so shattered, the relationship with any man. And I think that her father being there and walking away, really, she lost a lot of trust in men, and that really affected her future choice and relationships when it came to meeting my father and my older sister. She's got a different father to me and my brother, so her father, they maybe weren't the best relationships. With my father, I can't speak for my mum, and I can't speak for him, and I can't speak for my mum, and I can't speak for my sister's dad. I don't know, but from what I gathered down the line was that, one, my sister's dad, I think that was the love of her life, from what I could gather, but it didn't go too well. I don't know the dynamics of it, but it just wasn't a good relationship. They used to live with me nan at one point, and they were always arguing, and it ended up where the relationship just completely broke down. So it must have been the wrong relationship, and I do really think that that stems from not being shown as a child what a good relationship is. Even if you can't show it as a single parent, I think at least creating some awareness for your child of what represents a good relationship and what doesn't can be a huge helping hand. And by saying that, I don't mean, you know, give your child the Disneyland fairy tale idea of a relationship, because that's just as detrimental as showing them what an awful one is, or as my mum experienced, an awful relationship from a mother and father, and then the father walking out. They can both be detrimental. I think you don't want to set your child up for failure, but you could at least, you know, guide them along the path of, you know, expectations in relationship, maybe red flags, and just always knowing to have self-worth within themselves and knowing when to walk away. I think trying to give them a baseline like that, if you can't give them the example with you being the mum and the dad, at least try that way, which is what I try and do with my daughters now. Is I try and just, you know, guide them, and but yeah, just trying to guide them and show them, you know, the best way. And obviously they've had their own bad example of what a father shouldn't be. More so for my elder daughter. My younger one, she does know, but she doesn't know as much as in depth, and she didn't experience the full force of it the way my elder one did. So she's really got an idea of those boundaries. It was a really hard way to learn for her, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But I think that me having that bad relationship, and I've had other relationships, but that was the one major one where I had children too, like a person. And I think that my judgment in that relationship, and my judgment of even going with that person, stems from the parenting I got and what I was told about men. So I always was shown and told, you know, that, you know, men are just not worth the wait, men are useless. Like when we were brought up, my mum would often like call me brother useless. You know, you're a man, you should be decorating, you should be helping me cut the grass, you should be doing man jobs. And I think that was really detrimental to my brother. It really ruined his self-worth and stuff like that. But that was her view on men. So like she'd say often about like family members in our family that they weren't men, they never helped out, because I think no one was your typical DIY man, and there wasn't anyone really to be able to help and ask for help with, like, you know, decorating, putting like a shed up, just doing your DIY stuff. The men in our family aren't men like that, but they are still men, if you know what I mean. And even though they would help in ways that they could, and just not in the ways that my mum wanted. And I think that was just, she was frustrated because she didn't have that in her life, the help she needed. So she took it out on the men that were there in her life, which was her brothers. And that, I think her expectation of having a man was to have a man that could do all those things, and she couldn't, well, not she couldn't, but she just didn't meet anyone. And I think that goes into where she was so closed off to men because of the betrayal that her father had done to her. And I remember being younger in the house at home, and you know, every year you'd have to get your annual gas safety check, and if anything went wrong in the house, because so we rented a house and the landlord would send round the gas people, they'd send round someone to fix the electrics or whatever, and it was always a man that came around. I don't think it was actually ever a woman. And my mum would hate the men being in a house. She used to literally hate men being in a house. And she'd quite often tell them to get out, even though they were there to do a job to help fix the house. For whatever reason, she would tell them to get out because her emotion, she couldn't regulate it, and it would just overwhelm her, and she'd just say, like, get out. So I was brought up with that example of men. And I think in one degree, that's why I am so mentally strong, and I always know that I don't need a man. And I think that's a common thing, and I think sometimes that can be detrimental as well, because this thing, the way we say, you know, independent woman and don't need a man, and girl boss and all that, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, you know, credit yourself where credit's due, and you know, you may not need a man, you may not just want a man, but I also think that we have to be more mindful of what we're saying around children, because our children are like sponges, and they may pick that up the way I did. I picked it up from my mum, you know. A man was like an alien figure to me. I didn't know a man. And in one sense, it can be good because, you know, I've watched friends of mine from childhood. I don't speak to them as such, but I've known them since childhood. And some of them have got boyfriend after boyfriend coming in, and they're around their own children. And I think that's detrimental in my opinion. You know, you may have a different opinion, but I do. Wouldn't always, you know, I just don't think that that's a good example for your kids, and I could be wrong. You know, everyone's got a different opinion, as I said, but I think that can just be as bad as well. But I just feel like when it comes to being a single parent, I often question myself, am I a single parent because of the choices I made in a relationship, or what kinds of relationship to go for, because of what I've been taught at home? And did that come from my mum, what she'd been taught and what she'd witnessed? And I think we can't place all the blame on those past scenarios, but I think that they contribute to the situation of becoming a single parent. Now, that's obviously my own personal experience, and you know, people become single parents for so many different reasons. Often people become single parents, but they didn't start out as one, so they can be within a marriage or a relationship, and it either breaks down for whatever reason. It can just be a mutual breakdown. It doesn't always have to be as drastic as mine was, where it involves domestic violence. You know, there's so many factors that go into this that can happen. Basically, I just think that, you know, single parenting can arise from a variety of things, and it's not just a one-way system. People can be widowed as well. You know, I think there's a higher statistic. Most men, so the 10% of men who are single parents, I think it was 7% of them are actually widowed, where women are less likely to be widowed before they become a single parent. So you know, there is an issue there, and a question of, you know, in the majority of cases, why do men walk away from the family home, and why is it more common? And then you could go into the answer to that comes to my mind is, well, maybe there's more awareness of what a healthy relationship is and what a non-healthy one is. And, you know, I think back in the day, it was like you were married and you were married for life. Domestic violence was just looked over, no one really cared, and, you know, you're kind of stuck. Where these days, you know, we can walk away more freely, there's no judgment, we don't even get married as much, and, you know, it's an easier thing to just part the family. And I do agree that in a lot of circumstances that is the best thing to do, you know, because then you can sit there and look and go, okay, so if I'm in a relationship with a man and we're living together, we've got finances together, we've got children or a child together, that's a lot to split up from and walk away from. But even if that, you might have that stability for your child, you might be showing them a bad example of you know, what a relationship shouldn't be like, kind of the way I did a little bit. So I was fortunate, I never lived with my girl's father, and we never shared finances, anything like that. So mum's an easier walk away, and kind of the girl's stability, home life never really changed because it was always just me. But that can be different for other families and it's harder, but I know that in circumstances that needs to happen. So that might be why we have, a lot more single parent families and a lot more of women. But and in those that statistics, it doesn't say if the men or the men and women splitting up. It doesn't say if in that single parent family the 90% are single women. Is the dad a single parent too, but for 50% of the time? Or is he still in their child's life, but is he over this way and doing the weekends, and is he a single dad that way? Because he's still kind of a single dad, just not as much as the mother. So there's all those variables that go into it, which I'm not discrediting, I'm just saying from my own example. And more the question that arose to me is, where in this did the single parenting come from? In my circumstance at least, was it down to the patterns of my nan, my granddad, my mum, my dad, and then my own choices in relationships? Is a child, in my opinion, a child that comes from a stable home with a mum and a dad. Now I know there's different variables of stable homes. I'd say my home was stable for my girls, but I would like a man to be there and be able to show them what a good example of a father figure is and how a relationship between me and a man would work. So my girls have got an understanding of, like it's kind of like a line chart, and you've got in the middle of like the average of what a man and a woman should be like. And I'd want my children to stay in the average, or like the really good, and know that it shows them basically a baseline of the way a family dynamic, dynamics of a family works, rather than just knowing mum who's shouldering all the burden, or dad who is shouldering all the burden. We can share burdens, we can have successful relationships, we can communicate, we can even have successful co-parenting, which does happen. And they can also be classed as single parent families, which I do now. But I just wanted to kind of touch on the point of, I think that our past mum, dad and families, ancestors, I think that can have an impact on how our children form their future relationships and what partners they pick out and how they are together and how they parent together, and if it's done successfully or not. I think in an ideal world, it'd be good to give our kids the stable baseline of what that is, and I think it sets them up for a more successful future when it comes to raising their own family. I just want to put a disclaimer in before I end it. It doesn't mean that single parents can't bring up and have a successful family. You can, you will. I'd say my daughters are really well behaved. I've got one going to university at the right age, 18 years old. I'm proud of her for doing it, but I'm also proud of me because I put in the work to get the child that I've got. But does that mean I haven't had problems? No. Does it mean Hardy hasn't witnessed her own fair share of problems through my choices in my life? No. We have had our problems, but I've been the one stability, and I've grown up a lot. I think over the past, I'd say 10 years, I do a lot of thinking, a lot of reflecting, which is where these videos stem from, is me asking myself questions and trying to find the answers to try and change the patterns that may be affecting me, my mum, and I don't want them to affect my daughters. They may affect them even if I give them the awareness, which I do try and do, but at least I'm trying and I'm there and mindful to guide them, and I'm just hoping that they will be more successful in the family and child relationship department than I am. I hope I can make some change. I hope one day I can show them that how a successful relationship is. Even though they may be old enough to fly the nest, one day if I meet someone and we're together and they can come home with their kids to me, and their wouldn't be their dad, but it'd be their stepfather in a sense. I hope to God that one day I can show them that even if you have an unsuccessful relationship, that you can go on and find someone and have a successful one, and you know, even though that may not be their father, I can have a good father figure or male role model for them. And I just think that would be nice to give them, because it's something I never had, it's something my mum never had, and it's just something I strive for. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand why I've been on my own for so long, like I think it's almost a decade. But it's not that I'm closed off to relationships. I think I was for like the first 5 to 7, maybe 8 years. Yeah, like quite a long time, because my last relationship was quite traumatic. But I feel like I've worked on myself so much, and what I would and wouldn't do, and you know, the type of person you go for. You know, you've got to, if I was to go for the same type of man, then I think I'd get the same type of outcome, and I know that that's not what I want to do. And you know, I haven't got like, I don't mean it in depth, like he's got to have like I don't know, a brown beard, or he's got to have like black hair. I don't mean like those little things. I just mean qualities of who this person is. You know, what's his models, what's his standards, is he got kids, what type of father is he a good one, can he hold his own job, can he drive? And I don't mean by driving and stuff and jobs, I don't mean like a money standard. It just shows more of a maturity standard and being able to be self-sufficient, where he's self-sufficient, I am, and then you come together and you add to each other. You don't start the like one's dependent on the other. I think to have a successful relationship, you've got to be comfortable on your own and have your own home stable and yourself as stable as possible, in order to be able to add someone to it. And I just think a relationship should add to your happiness, and it shouldn't be your happiness. And I think that kind of sets you up for the healthy relationship. And I know that relationships and meeting new people isn't that easy, but it's kind of, that's at least my baseline of what I would have. And it's why I've been on my own for so long, because I won't just go with anyone just because someone pays me attention. It doesn't mean I'm going to be like all over the place, like, oh my gosh, you know, like, no. Like, if I don't see the qualities of just the bare minimum, then I'm not interested, because 1, I refuse to make the same mistake twice. 2, I want to give the girls a good example. And 3, I don't want to set myself up for failure. That doesn't mean I'm not open to, you know, relationships and I'm just closed off to anything but like this high standard. I'm not. It's just like bare minimum qualities that I'd look out for, if that makes sense. I hope it don't sound really like snobby or horrible or just unrealistic with it. I'm not. I think I'm pretty open-minded to a relationship in future. But I know kind of, you know, you kind of just know the type. Like, say like in Liverpool, right, let me just say for example, like, you know, I wouldn't go and have a relationship with a man that was my age and he's still hanging out on the street corner in a black tracksuit smoking weed. Like, no. Now, he might be the nicest man in the world, but that's not my standard of a man that I want for me. Doesn't mean he could be literally the nicest person in the world, but it's just not for me, and that's just the way I am. I've seen people in relationships with people that I wouldn't dream of going with that are happy because they're a match. It's what they like and they're together, and you know, kind of goes like that. So don't think I'm being like, you know, I don't feel like I'm looking down on anyone. I'm not. It's just, you know, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. You know, I'm like a chunk of love over here, and people might, you know, I don't want someone who's chunky, I don't want someone who's got kids, you know, and they can have that opinion and that standard because it's their life, and I just feel like that's my standard and my opinion. If that makes sense anyway. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you got the point of what I was trying to make in the video, which was basically, you know, how does single parenthood and our lack of a role model when it comes to males, in my circumstance, a male role model, a lack of a male role model in my circumstance and my girl's circumstance and my mum's, how does that affect our future choices in our relationships? And I can't particularly answer the question, but I do think that it contributes somewhat to our choices, and maybe if we could be more mindful of that when it comes to making choices for relationships, and if we can make our kids more mindful as they grow, you know, slowly have these conversations with them maybe we could stop the pattern and make it less likely that they go for a destructive red flag from the beginning relationship, and maybe hold out for something that would be worthwhile. Maybe, when, like, I try and teach my daughters, especially my older one, she's at that age appropriate to have the conversation, but be mindful who you are having sex with, because even though you may be using protection, is that someone that you will think would be a good father? Is it someone that you think would be a good husband? And if the answer is no, then you don't sleep with them, because there's always a chance when you do that could happen. Yeah, I just think it's a thoughtful topic, and I can't quite answer it, but I'm just becoming more mindful of it, and just it makes me more aware when looking to pick future partners for me, and hopefully my girls making them more aware when they come to picking future partners for them as well, and especially bringing children into it. If they were to have a child with someone, I want to give them the best chance at being aware of, is this the person that you think is going to be a good role model for your child? Because I think as a mum now, I wish I'd known that years ago. I wish I'd been mindful of that years ago. And although I'm very grateful for the little girls that I got out of it, like my whole heart is grateful for them, and I wouldn't change it in a million years, I do wish I could give them the father that they deserve. And I feel partially guilty for it, because it was my choice in a partner that created the situation, and obviously it's not all my fault. He could go and get his stuff together, and that's a whole different video, but basically I still played a part in it. And I just wish I could give them what I can't give them. I can be the dad model as well as the mum, but I'm never really going to be dad, am I? I'm just mum who has to do dad duties as well, or I'm just mum that has to do all of the duties. So yeah, I don't know, it's something to think about anyway. But anyway, I'm very grateful for you watching. I hope you enjoyed the topic. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think, your own experience. Have you got a similar one to me? Do you think I'm right when it comes to, is it a pattern that comes from our mums and dads and nans and granddads? Is it our own choices? Is it just chance? Is there even a right answer to this? Is there a right answer? But the answer is different in every different circumstance. Probably more the truth. I don't know, but all I know is that I'm just going to try and be more mindful about it. But comment down below anyway and let me know what you think. I really appreciate you watching my video today. Also subscribe if you're not already. I do videos like this every Tuesday, different topics. And if you've got any topic ideas, message me down below or inbox me on Instagram. My Instagram name will also be linked down below, and it'll be on the screen as well, so go ahead and follow me over there. Give me a like if you liked it, and I shall see you all in my next video. Bye guys.
You had me at a